It's all how you feel about your own body because this is home. And if you're not comfortable at home, you're not going to be comfortable anywhere else.
Welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast. It's your girl Kate here. This is the place to find inspiring stories of world-changing women and girls every single week. We have a new unique story coming your way every single week, so make sure that you subscribe to the One Girl Revolution podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and everywhere you listen to podcasts. Check out our website at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number one, girlrevolution.com, to find all of our over 190 episodes of the podcast. Please listen to all of the episodes of the podcast and share them. Watch our Emmy-nominated documentary series on our website and YouTube. Donate to our nonprofit organization to help us continue our critical work to elevate women's voices and their stories. Go to onegirlrevolution.com today. On this week's episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast, I welcome Connie Sobczak, co-founder of The Body Positive. The Body Positive is a nonprofit organization that teaches people to listen to their bodies, learn, and to thrive in this life. Their ultimate goal is to end the harmful consequences of negative body image, eating disorders, depression, anxiety, cutting, suicide, substance abuse, relationship violence, and any other thing that people are dealing with. Connie herself had an eating disorder in her teen years, and her own experience with that, as well as the death of her sister Stephanie, inspired Connie to do the work that she's doing today to help people live with more appreciation and love for their precious lives and their precious bodies. Connie founded The Body Positive in honor of her sister and to ensure that her daughter Carmen and other children would grow up in a new world, one where people are free to focus on the things in life that truly matter. Connie's passion is watching the light that emerges when people recognize and embrace their magnificent, authentic selves. This episode is so incredibly powerful. I am so honored to share Connie's story with you, and I'm so excited to promote the incredible work of The Body Positive. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Connie. Connie, welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast.
Thanks, Kate. I'm so happy to be here with you.
I have really been looking forward to having you on because, well, for so many reasons. I want you to tell your story to our listeners. You have so much to share about the incredible work that you're doing, but there are a lot of thoughts and opinions when it comes to body positivity, and there are multiple definitions of what it means. And I think there are a lot of people that have very big opinions, that whether they're quote unquote for the body positivity movement or they're against it, or some people don't really understand what it means. And I stumbled upon your organization because you really have a holistic approach. And that's what I'm all for: true empowerment and loving your body and the skin that you're in. But there's so many facets to women and girls. There's so many facets to just human beings. And so what I love so much about the Body Positive is you really take this holistic approach through your nonprofit organization. So I want to talk about all of that. But before we get into the work that you're doing, I would love to rewind and hear a little bit about your own story. I know there's a personal reason why the Body Positive exists and why you're doing the work that you do. But can you rewind and tell me a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and just a little bit about your own story?
I would love to do that. I'm so excited about all the other stuff too. My story. So I was a really free, happy child. I lived on a farm, had a horse, and really just used my body. I loved moving my body. And then when I hit puberty, I had moved up a grade, so I was younger than a lot of my friends, and so I sort of became a follower. And then suddenly everybody was dieting, and so I suddenly learned that there was something wrong with my body. And what was happening at home was my sister Stephanie, who was 4 years older than I was, she had put on quite a bit of weight, and my dad started really hassling her about her weight, especially at the dinner table. Are you sure you want to eat that, Stephanie? Do you know how many calories are in that? And so I absorbed all of this. And she was a big person. She was close to 6 feet tall. She was just a big person. And I was really, I was small, and I was also kind of just entering puberty. I'm known as the runt of my family. Both my sisters are really tall and I'm not. um, but so I really absorbed that message from my dad that food was something to be afraid of, combined with all the messaging from my friends. And then, I mean, this was in the 70s, so there was no social media, but there was television and there was Farrah Fawcett and there were Charlie's Angels. And so there was an ideal of what we were supposed to look like. And so I really went for that. And all of my friends became bulimic. And this was before there was even a word for it. We just all discovered it, taught each other, and all ended up with bulimia. And then independently, my sister did as well. She had gone to Weight Watchers. She lost a whole bunch of weight, gained it all back, as most people do who go to Weight Watchers, and then became bulimic. And so we discovered that and we bonded over our body hatred. And then she got breast implants probably in her early 20s. She had what she considered deformed nipples. So she went to have them, quote unquote, fixed. And the plastic surgeon said, well, while you're here, do you want us to make your breasts bigger? So she did. One of them hardened, and 2 doctors took their forehands and crushed her breast to the implant, and silicone oozed out of the implant into her bloodstream, and she developed an autoimmune disease. So she had that combined with her eating disorder. I, at 21, was really lucky. I busted my way through my eating disorder on my own. There was no help at all. I didn't even still know the word, but I had this moment. I had some interesting things happen where I really was at a point where I didn't want to be on the planet anymore and was really feeling very unhappy with my life. And then I had these 2 dreams that I had tried to commit suicide. And so like within just this 1 week, and then I had just told my mom that I had some form of anorexia. And I was standing on my rooftop of my apartment building in Berkeley and looking down and just feeling like it would be so much easier just to go. And my phone rang. This is before answering machines or anything. So like I went down the stairs and it was my mom. She said, I think you're trying to kill yourself with your behaviors. And like my dreams came back to me in that moment. I went, oh my God, I am. And I don't want to die. I don't want to die. And that was the beginning of me reaching in and finding my life force that pulled me through. I left a partner that I was with who was very, would poke me in my thighs and tell me I was getting soft, I should go run. I was an obsessive runner at that time. And so I ended up leaving that person. I made a whole new group of friends. I left kind of my friend group that was really connected to what's now called diet culture. And yeah, I just kind of changed my whole community, changed my life. And within a couple of months, I was done with the behaviors. And then I had this place where I realized my soul was empty. And so then I started therapy with a really awesome feminist therapist, Kim Chernin, who had written a book in early 80s called The Obsession: Reflections on the Tyranny of Slenderness. So I got really angry at the world and the reason that so many girls and women were struggling with eating problems. I started learning about it. I learned about the word bulimia, and I just got really pissed off at the world. And that was also something that fueled my recovery. Fast forward, I got through my 20s. I had dropped in and out of college during my eating disorder years, and I ended up graduating. I became a body-centered therapist. I was doing like this really intense body work with people around their bodies and having peace with their bodies. And I was planning to go back to school and become a therapist, but I really just loved this work. And then my sister died. So she, at the age of 36, complications from the breast implants, the autoimmune disease, and malnutrition, because she never got over her eating disorder. The sad thing was, like, when I was getting over mine, the last little bit was she took me to Hawaii with her. She had won a free trip for 2, and she took me with her. And we just mirrored each other. Like, we would eat food, and I said, I'm not going. I'm really trying to get over this. I won't go if we're gonna, do these behaviors. And so we didn't, and we would eat food, and then we'd look at each other in the mirror and be like, you look just the same as you did yesterday, and so do you. And we wore our bathing suits, and that was it for me. That was the healing part. So when she died, at that point, I'd had given birth to a daughter who was 1 year old, Carmen, and I just got really scared that I would raise a child. Why not? Like, 2 out of 3 sisters, and my other sister didn't really like her body. And I got really scared, and it was like, I'm going to change the world for Carmen. And I didn't know exactly what that meant, but within a few years, I got the idea to make videos for kids to plant seeds of a different way to be in their bodies. And then I met Elizabeth Scott, my colleague, who was doing prevention work, or she was doing treatment work with high school students who had eating disorders. So we joined forces, and that's how the Body Positive was born.
I'm so sorry about the loss of your sister. And
Thank
it's
you.
like there's so much depth to that, but it's beautiful that her legacy, in a good way, in a positive way, lives on. And I'm a firm believer that we all have the power to change the world through our lives. And my greatest hope is, like, even when I'm gone, that my legacy still lives on through people. And so what a beautiful example that you are of really carrying on your sister's legacy in a positive light. And we all have struggles and things that we go through. I don't understand like the rhyme or reason to it. And I know that there are multifacets to the work that you're doing and the people that you're working with. And it's hard to know. It's like, well, is it, and you probably have a lot of stats on this. It's like, I think sometimes, especially with the way that we view our bodies, the way that we view our value as human beings stems from childhood, right? How we're taught to look at our bodies, and even food, our relationship with food. There's so much there where it's like, depending on what you're able to afford or not afford, or how your parents had a relationship with food. And that can be passed on from generation to generation too, right? Where you're like, you grow up in this culture, this diet culture. And I don't know, Connie, you can tell me better than anyone because you're working in this every single day, but I don't feel like we hear about bulimia, or we hear about eating disorders as much as like maybe in the 90s or early 2000s, but it still exists 100% in our world. And it's probably more prevalent than ever before. And of course, there are so many other disorders that now we're realizing exist. They probably have always existed, but we don't hear about it as much. Bulimia, that I remember growing up, I would hear about that as a thing, or anorexia. And now it's just not talked about as much.
And the scary thing is that since COVID, I mean, eating disorder rates just went sky high during COVID. And young people are still dealing with that. I mean, I think that that's one of the main things that came out of COVID was that, plus all the other mental health issues. But I mean, anorexia, they are mental health issues, eating disorders. So our work really is this it's a body-centered approach to social emotional learning. And so we combine, like you said in the beginning, it's a holistic approach. And we started the Body Positive before there was a Body Positive movement, because there was not a whole lot of the internet was just being, something, and we didn't have a website, and there was no social media at all. And so working with students then, it's just interesting to see the difference. Now, obviously it's, heightened since social media and gotten better, both. It's a double-edged sword. I mean, it's beautiful in so many ways, and creating community and breaking isolation. And the other with the amount of imagery and filters and all that stuff that people are having to deal with, and all the stuff about being a certain way. I mean, it's overwhelming the amount that hits they get a day for thinking they're supposed to fix themselves, young people. So
it's all so amplified, the things that we all dealt with, where it was like, okay, you got to wear this outfit, or do this thing, or be this size, or do this, do that. Well, now with social media, I cannot even imagine being a young person growing up, going through school, being on social media, and it's just like pounded into you. And like even your own story, right? Like it's still pounded into you, even like your dad with what he was saying to your sister. And like, on a daily basis, you're hearing about it, but it's not constantly. And now with social media, with the media, I love that there are different movements where it's like, even the movements with like magazines or photography, where they don't airbrush things or don't change things as much, or Skims with Kim Kardashian. She's done a great job, I feel like, of highlighting a variety of different people, right? Like different sizes, different height. I'm taller, like your sister's. One of my sisters is short. She's like the little one of the family. And so I think really digging into the beauty of every single body and every single person, and like our bio individuality is so beautiful and so amazing. And like what you're doing is really this holistic approach. So I want to ask you, what was the suddenly moment, or was there a suddenly moment where you and your colleague were like, hey, this is something, here's my story, here's your story, here's the work you're doing, here's what I know, here's what I'm experiencing. Was there a suddenly moment where you were like, yes, this is what we need to start. It's going to be called the Body Positive. This is what we're going to do. Was there a spark moment, or was it a variety of spark moments? Tell me about the founding of this organization.
Yeah. So I started it really kind of a little before I met Elizabeth. I mean, we're co-founders because what she brought was, I had started, I was coming at it from the creative side. I felt like I just remember this feeling of, if I can reach young people in a creative way, if I can get them involved somehow. And that's where the idea for the videos came in. And I also wanted to do something creative. And I mean, interestingly, I had hurt my back, and so I couldn't do my body work anymore. And I was in a women's circle called Soul of the Sacred Feminine. And so I was really like asking, what is it that I'm supposed to be doing now? What should I be doing now? How can I be bringing in healing and love and divine, like the divine feminine really to the planet? And how am I supposed to do it? What is my path at this point to do this? And that's when I got this idea of working with kids. And I really believed that if we could have young people who would either choose to have children or work with children as they got older, have a different relationship with their body, then this would be evolution, and we could break that cycle of passing from generation to generation. And I really believed this was part of evolution. And so for me, the spark for me was, I am going to change the world for my child. Carmen will not grow up like this. And she didn't. She grew up in the body positive. I was talking about it all the time with her teachers. I was doing work in her schools, her friends. We would be in carpools and we would be deconstructing billboards because we were driving to San Francisco across the bridge. And in those days, it wasn't all tech billboards. Now they're just all tech, but the horrific fashion billboards. And so she just grew up in a different world. And that was my spark. Elizabeth really didn't have issues growing up. She came from a different background. And hers was that she, as a therapist, wanted to be doing something on the prevention side. It was breaking her heart that all these teenage girls were coming into her practice with eating disorders, and what was the cause of it. And so as a social worker, she wanted to change that. And so, we kind of came from different directions, but then I had this moment that it was just like, this is going to be big, and it is. I mean, we've reached millions, over 1 million people around the world. We've trained so many people, and people are taking our work everywhere. And then the movement, we don't take credit for the movement at all. It just sort of grew organically out of somewhere, 100th monkey or something. But it's a new topic that people talk about. So
yeah, like I said, I love the holistic approach that you are taking too, where it's like, you get these, like I said at the beginning, you get these differing opinions where it's like, is it good? Is it bad? Is it good for culture to have this body positive movement? But then there are multiple definitions, but at the root of it, which that's so cool to hear from you, that you guys were really at the beginning, you were the first people that were stepping out and talking about this. And it was this holistic approach. And I think in some areas, we've lost a little bit of sight of that, where it's like, okay, well, what does body positive mean? Or what does body positivity mean?
Donate to One Girl Revolution's nonprofit organization to help us continue our work, highlighting inspiring women and girls that are changing the world through their lives, promoting their work and their organizations, and building a powerful and positive force out in the world dedicated to empowering women, their voices, and their stories. Donate at onegirlrevolution.com/donate. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com/donate.
So I want to ask you, Connie, how do you define body positivity? And like, how do you define, being positive about your bodies when you're talking to your daughter, when you're talking to young people?
Yeah, I want to first say that there were other people in the movement before us, and especially fat women who are really doing work, and women of color who are really doing work around honoring diversity in bodies. And so the body positivity movement really started before us. I mean, we started using the body positive, in 1995, as the name of our organization.
Yes.
So that's why I don't want to just say we take credit for being
For sure.
It's been something that's been building. We were on the shoulders of many amazing people who started it.
No, and thank you for bringing that up, because also with any movement, there are so, and even like One Girl Revolution, it's about one girl, one woman who's making a difference. But we know that it's an army of women. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Sure. Yeah. So the body positive. So the movement. Yeah. How do I feel about it? I mean, I guess I get tired of everybody arguing about what it is and what it isn't, and because for me, what it is. And the body positive, our organization, and what we teach with our Be Body Positive model. I mean, we create a space for people to come to share their own unique experience with their body. They have their own unique story, and we are here to listen and witness. And the whole goal is to provide tools that can remove obstacles for people to have a peaceful, joyful, loving relationship with their bodies, so they can actually live their lives in this body, and using the body as a vehicle to do all the other things in life that we want to do, instead of the body being the sole focus of everything that we spend all of our time doing, right? I mean, when we have peace, then we get to do other things. Food is not an issue anymore, so we can eat, and we help other people who don't have enough to eat, so we get to be activists by making peace with our bodies. And so it really is about each individual coming with their own unique story, and being able to be authentic in that, and being witnessed in a non-judgmental space that isn't about comparison and no hierarchy at all. And that really ultimately, to me, is what body positivity can be and is for us, and for the all the people that we've reached and who work with us.
It's so amazing, the work that you're doing, and how you're really creating these spaces for women's voices and girls' voices, and really anyone, no matter who you are. I think we all can have these moments where it's like you're seeing your body in a specific way, and that can just color the way that you look at every other facet of your life, right? Like if you don't feel confident in the skin that you're in, how that can kind of color, the different opportunities that you put yourself forward for, or even I know my story is a little bit different. I had terrible eczema as a little kid, and I never would raise my hand, Connie, in class. I was this feisty little kid, a couple years old, going to school, and I stopped raising my hand because kids were so cruel and would mock me anytime. And all of us have those stories, right? Like my story is like everyone else's, but when you don't have that confidence, like you kind of almost lose your voice, and you lose sight of who you are and who you're created to be. And what we care so deeply about here at One Girl Revolution is that every single person has a purpose, and we're as unique as our fingerprint. And if we really believed that, if we truly believed that, how differently we would view our bodies, how differently we would live our lives, and even the decisions we make on a daily basis would be so different.
I just, hearing your story, and this is one of the reasons that we're working right now on a kindergarten through 8th grade classroom curriculum that is so beautiful. We're just finishing the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade right now, but it's really the whole idea is to help children understand all of these concepts at age appropriate levels, but when they're really young, that everybody's different, and there are things about us and how to be kind to each other. I mean, it really is, I cry sometimes when I read our curriculum, because I just can't wait for kids to be receiving this. It's got a beautiful social justice focus to it. It's so inclusive, and yeah, there is a different way to do this, and that's the thing. And we can, and it's interesting because when my daughter hit puberty, she and all her friends who had been hanging around and knew about the body positive and were involved just because of Carmen, just as friends, like their bodies all started changing, and they would notice the differences, but they weren't comparing with any hierarchy. It was like, oh, your breasts are bigger than mine, and your legs are longer, and mine are this and that. But there wasn't like one way that they were supposed to be. They were just all really honoring of each one of them and how they were growing. And when I saw that, I was like, okay, I could quit now. This is like what I'd really hoped for. And I mean, Carmen has said to me that if she grew up in another household, she would have had an eating disorder. She's a high achiever. She's, there are many characteristics that would have sent her to an eating disorder. And she's like, but because of you, Mom, I don't have one. And the body positive. I mean, it's not just me, it's the whole community.
Community
not
is
just her, but all the other stories too.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And community is so important. And also, I don't know if you've ever seen the musical South Pacific, but it's like, you've got to be taught from a young age, like, that people look different and like who to stay away from. It was this kind of revolutionary song. But I think about that so often, you've got to be taught, well, what you're taught from a very young age as a little kid, by your family, by your friends, by people in your community. Not that we want to shield our children away from everyone, we don't want to hide them away, but really creating these spaces. And that can have a ripple effect, even what you saw with your daughter and her friends, and how it's like, oh, you look different. You're taller, you're shorter, your legs are longer. And like, even I have a lot with my friends where I have a lot of friends that are shorter than I am. I'm like 5'9", and I'm like, oh, I'm so jealous of you. You get to wear this like these cute little dresses and like, it looks like a shirt on me. So I can't. And then vice versa, right? Where it's
like, I wish I had long legs.
Yeah, we always, there's always that's always going to be there. I wish I had curly hair. I wish I had straight hair. There are always going to be those elements in culture. We see something that we find beautiful. Like beauty is so important for us to recognize and to talk about it. But beauty looks so different for each person. Each of us are beautiful and uniquely created, and really seeing that and seeing the value and the purpose in each individual. But for people that are listening, Connie, I know you've talked a little bit about your work with the Body Positive. Talk to me about, what is the mission of the Body Positive, and who do you serve? Who do you work with?
Yes. So our mission really is to teach people to listen to their bodies. It's a big piece of it. And then to learn from their bodies so they can thrive. And the way we do that is we have a Be Body Positive model that has 5 competencies or skills that people can practice, and emphasis on the word practice, because there is no perfection with any of this work. We don't perfect self-love. I'm just going to say that we don't. There are days when we can have self-love, and I can say I have self-love, and I can have bad days, and days when I get in fights with myself. So, but the 5 competencies, the first one is reclaim health. And that's really looking at messages around health and deconstructing messages around health, and the link between racism and sizeism, and all of the messaging around everything to do with weight and health, and just really looking at what is the mythology, what is reality, and how can then each person become the expert of their body, their unique expert. Doesn't mean we don't get information from others, from medical people and all that, but we always come back to, how does this sit with me? How does this feel in my own body? How can I know my body so well that I can really be that expert for myself? The second is practice intuitive self-care. And that is the turning into the listening to the body. What do I want to eat? How do I want to move? How much rest do I need? What is unique for my self-care? And by listening, and then through trial and error, that is the key way to do this. We try something. And when I got over bulimia, that was key for me. I was like, I don't know how to feed myself. So I'm going to think about, what color do I want? What texture of food do I want? What season is it? Do I want something smushy or warm or filling, or what does my body need? And then I try it and be like, oh no, that doesn't work. And over time, I learned really what, works for me, which changes again over time. But if we live with trial and error, we have to cultivate self-love, which is our third competency. We have to turn towards ourselves with kindness. When I did my TEDx talk, embracing your critical voice, the gateway to self-love, the key piece with that is we don't try and push that critic away. For me, like, I see the critic as a young child who needs attention. And so instead of trying to push her away, I turn to her. I don't want her to run the show and yell at me, but I want to find out why she's afraid. So the critic really is the fearful part of us. So we do a lot of work around that, and it's so beautiful. It's a key component of everything we do, because that leads into all parts of life. So if a student is struggling with their academics or feeling like they have to be perfect there, this piece around self-love is there for them as a foundation. And then the fourth competency is declare your own authentic beauty. So with this, we really look at who we come from, our ancestors, whether we know them or not, or we choose the ancestors we want to be our ancestors. But this idea of us coming from a long line of people, and these bodies were created in just these interesting ways. And then the idea that we all get to have beauty, like you were talking about. And if we let go of cultural definitions of what beauty is, and that somebody gets to decide for us whether we have beauty or not, and we get to think of beauty as part of nature. My body is a natural wonder. I'm like, my hands are like trees now as I get old, like I have tree bark hands. And so many things about our bodies are beautiful when they're not perfect. The Japanese concept of wabi-sabi, where you look at the rough edges and the things that are imperfect, and that's where beauty is. So we do a lot around that, which is just lovely. And then the fifth competency is build community. It's why we do the work we do. We need people to be around us who are choosing to say, I'm going to live my life. This is my body. This is my life. I'm going to figure out what I need. And when I fall down, someone's there to help me get back up, and I'm there for them. And we can say no thanks to a lot of messages, and we can reinforce the messages that allow us to live our authentic, beautiful lives. So that's the body positive. So we do it. We have curriculum. So we train high school and college student leaders. We train staff at colleges. We train mental health professionals. A lot of therapists and dietitians work with us. Medical professionals, yoga teachers. A lot of parents do take our trainings. And then now with the work with the new classroom curriculum, we're kind of going back to our roots, which is where we started with those videos that I had talked about wanting to make in the late 90s.
That's amazing. So how do you get connected to the student leaders that you're working with, with this new curriculum? How do people just reach out to you? Is it a variety of different ways? But how do you get connected with the people that you serve?
Yeah, mostly people find us. People type in body positivity in Google and we show up, fortunately, because one thing that we struggle with is marketing, PR, and all the things that would help us get out in the world. We do, I've spoken at some conferences, but a lot of it's word of mouth. A lot of people who have taken our training want to share it with others, and then, or like one person at a school will have taken our training and then they want the whole school to be trained. So mostly it comes through, and like in high schools and middle schools, it comes through kind of usually the counselors or people who are seeing the kids struggling and who want to make a difference and change the cultural environment.
That's so important just for teachers to see, and whether it's parents or friends, for us to pay attention. I know even like with suicide levels are so high, and so many people, sometimes people have no idea, right? Like the Twitch story, which still breaks my heart. Twitch, who many people know from Ellen DeGeneres, and he's 40 years old, committed suicide and nobody even knew. So like there are always those kind of stories. And even with eating disorders or anything that all of us, sometimes we struggle in silence. We, hide whatever we're going through, our struggles. But it's so important for people to recognize when something's happening, teachers, counselors, pay attention to the signs, and then find, like the body positive, what are things that you can actually do to aid this community or aid this person with what they're going through.
Right. It's so beautiful. I think that's what keeps me going is the student leadership groups that I've worked with and seeing how they connect with each other. So in the early days, Elizabeth and I were running the groups of leaders. We had, one group of leaders in the San Francisco Bay Area, and they were from all of different communities and different backgrounds. And just seeing them come together in this space where there was no judgment and no comparison. And they really became friends in this beautiful, deep way, because it's not shallow and it's not based on fear around how do I fit? Do I fit? Do I not fit? Because everybody got to fit, because I call us a group of misfits. I mean, we're all, we are the misfits. We are saying no thanks to whatever that is out there that's trying to control us. And so that was really beautiful. And then just to see throughout the nearly 30 years of doing this work, how people have connected with each other and what they're doing. Yeah, it's really sweet.
It's really incredible. And young people, I think it's so important to highlight those stories. We've done a lot of that on One Girl Revolution, where it's young people have the power to create these ripple effects, right? Where they help somebody or they share their story and someone else says, oh, I had that happen to me too, or I'm dealing with that too. And really creating this community, which is a big part of the work that you're doing, where people don't feel alone. Okay, so Connie, 30 years, you've done so much work. You've worked with so many different people, so many groups, so many schools, so many individuals. I'm sure that you could write a book about all these different stories and highlight, you could write a book series or do a documentary series on it. But is there a story or two of people that have been helped by your work that really impacted you, or that you feel like really emulate the power of the work that you're doing?
Yes. So there are so many, two that come to mind right now, because these two young people are on our board of directors because they grew up and wanted to stay with us, and we stayed connected. One is Jessica, who I met her when she was 14. She's 37 now. And she talks about how, and we have a really beautiful video of her on our This Is Beauty page of our website. And she's talking about dance and movement and just this beautiful story. But she talks about how she doesn't know her life anymore without the body positive. She's a person of color who was raised in a predominantly white community in Marin County. And this work allowed her to be herself and to know herself and to stay rooted in her heritage and her ethnicity, and stay connected to her ancestors in a way that really honored her own unique body. And she's just such an amazing human. And so she graduated from high school, went to college, and stayed in touch with me, and we would do speaking engagements together, and went through a lot of stuff and trauma and pain in her life that I was there and got through that. And now she has 2 children, and she's raising 2 boys who, with this work. And it's so different. And she and I will always work together. And, it's just this beautiful story of, and now like in her preschool, where her son is, they're doing body positive work. And 2 of the new director of the school actually was at a high school where we had a program, wasn't a leader, but had an impact, impacted by the program there. And so those messages are now infused into this little preschool, and that high school program shut down this year, sadly. But the preschool now, like this preschool, will get to carry it on. And the teacher also went to that school. So those kinds of things are really powerful. So the ripples, like you were talking about, and just, I have no idea how far they're so far out there. And it's just really beautiful. Another story is Athena, who is 21 now. And I met them when they were just the last year of high school. And they were at a school where they brought the body positive to the school, and they went off to college. And it was so sweet because right around graduation, I was doing something at the school, and Athena came up and said, "You changed my life 100%. I don't know if you've ever heard that before." I was like, "Well, I've heard it, but I love hearing it more, tell me again." And just at our last board meeting, they were actually saying that, the body positive saved their life. That's the way they put it. And they went off to college, and because of this work, they were chosen to do a TEDx talk at the Tufts campus. So they did that. And then because of that, they were seen by a production company that was doing work for Disney for their Growing Up series. And so Athena has an episode on the series Growing Up, and talks about having had an eating disorder in middle school. Again, a young person of color in a predominantly white school, and then having the eating disorder, getting through that, but not fully getting through, right? It's like getting to that maintenance phase of that, but still having the body hatred, and then ended up in the body positive program, and then just everything switched and changed. And they're such an influence. They are reaching so many people, and they go out and do a lot of speaking engagements at different high schools, and really just so influential and powerful and inspiring.
It's so incredible. And I think it's so important for young people. We all kind of need this, to hear from someone who's been there, right? Like somebody who has their own experience and said, look, I know where you're coming from, because the reality is we're all dealing with a lot of the same things over and over again. And even like multi-generations, where it's like, oh, so and so, some things get passed on, like you were sharing, even with like the diet culture. And if I think that women are so powerful in this, that if you can change the trajectory of a woman's life, or even the way that she views her body, her kids' lives are going to be so different, and her children's children, her grandchildren are going to be different. And so it's really affecting multi-generations of people. And so that's what I love so much about the work that you're doing. And it's cool to hear about people who have been touched by your work, who are now doing the same thing, who are like, hey, what can I do to give back? Because we all have those facets of our story where it's like, hey, I've been where you've been. Let me share my story, or let me help you, or let me just be present in your life. It's incredible. So talk to me about your book, Embody. What can you share with me about it? And maybe what's like the biggest takeaway if people were reading it? I'm going to put the link to it in the show notes so people can buy it. But if there was like one thing that you want people to take away from it, what would it be?
Well, I think it really is the stories. I mean, I tell my story of healing, and then there are stories from many different people and from diverse backgrounds who have been, influenced by the body positive, been helped by the body positive. So the book goes through the 5 competencies. There's practices at the end, but there's stories. And I think that the stories are the most powerful to me. I teach through storytelling. That's the way I know how to help the world, and my own story, but also then gathering and sharing stories like you. I mean, I think it's so powerful for people to get to hear from someone who might have the same experience. So to me, that's the most beautiful part of the book. And then also the practices that people can actually, everything we do, I want people to have something to take with them. I want them to have something tangible and practical, and these are fun things that people can do either by themselves or with others, and so that's what I love about it.
I will be sure to post the link in the show notes so people can easily check it out, and of course all the websites and social media for the Body Positive, so people can continue to follow the work that you're doing. So Connie, I want to share a stat because I think it's really important. All these stats because of the work you're doing every single day, but just so our listeners can really kind of, I guess, latch on or like bite on to what you're talking about. Maybe they have their own experiences, they have their own stories, they have their own stories even with their children or children's children. Like there's so many generations of people that are affected by eating disorders, by this negative view of ourselves as human beings, our body being a piece of that. But in the world today, 53% of girls at the age of 13 are unhappy with their bodies. By the time they reach 17, it increases to 78%, which is mind-blowing. When I saw that stat, it just blew my mind. I know that it's true because of my own experiences and also the young women that I know. Where do we even begin in helping reduce those percentages so that girls can grow up confident, body positive? I know that your programming is a big part of that, but where do we as individual people even begin with that?
Yeah, it's overwhelming. I mean, it's interesting because having done this for so long and seeing improvements and then backslides and improvements and backslides, and there are days when it's just very hard and I feel like it's never ending and I'll never see what I want to see. And I also then remember all the people whose lives have been changed. So yes, getting our program into schools is key. It really is key. And because what I tell parents looking at their own relationship with their body and listening to the words that they say and recognizing that how they feel about themselves and how they talk to their children and talk to themselves in front of their children is so much a part of what's going on. I think a lot of times adults want to blame social media for everything. It's not the only thing. And adults are influenced by social media as well, and those messages are coming through them into their children. And so I'm not saying don't look on social media, but I think each individual has to look at their own relationship with their body and do the work to heal it. Doesn't have to be perfect. There's research from Neva Peron, a researcher in Toronto, who talks about if a child has one person in their life who is embodied in a positive way, that child has a much greater chance of growing up staying connected to their own body. And so each adult who has connection with a child, do your work, forgive yourself for whatever you've done or said, and from this moment forward, start the process of seeing and opening your eyes and taking off the blinders to the messaging that we give to others without trying to, and maybe just how we feel about ourselves.
Kids are so perceptive too. It's like, even if you're just like internalizing some sort of dialogue like that, kids know. And so it's so important for us to really dig down into our own hearts, into our own souls, and say, like, what are the messages that I'm telling myself when I look in the mirror? How do I interact with my own body, my own appearance, my own life? And I would even venture to say that people around us see that too, right? If we're not confident, if we don't love our bodies, other people can see that too. And even how we walk down the street, I think about that with my own self, as like days where I might be more insecure about something, or even like in the work that I'm doing, maybe I feel like I'm having a hard day, like you had shared. And just the way that I carry my body, our bodies are so powerful that like even the way that we think about our body or the way that we're carrying our body can be a message, can be a story to the rest of the world.
It can. And to remember that we are going to have bad days, and we're going to have internal days, and we're going to have off days, and we're going to have days where we look at ourselves and go, I mean, I'm 63 now and my body's changing every day. It's a little scary sometimes, to be an old person. And it's kind of like, oh, okay, I'm an old person. Everyone's like, you're not old. And I'm like, well, I actually am. I mean, I'm in the last third, I have longevity in my genes. So my mom's 95, but still, I'm entering, I'm in old age now. And I want to be able to allow myself to have an old age body. I created a book called with a young photographer, a friend of mine, called Bodies of Nature, Nature of Bodies. And we took pictures of me in nature with the places that are allowing me to feel comfortable aging. Like I was talking about my tree bark hands, and like my legs are lumpy. And I think of them as, like I go to this lake every summer that's just the love of my life. And I've been there since I was 2, and I healed from my eating disorder partly because of that place. But when I see the sparkles on the lake, I remember that it's from ripples, and, they're lumpy, and the lumps make the sparkles, and I love the sparkles. So when I look at my thighs and I have that moment of cultural messages getting in and saying those are ugly, I go, wait a minute, they're lumpy. They're like the lake when the sparkles are shining. And so doing things like that, allowing ourselves to see our bodies in different ways. And then, just to remember, either keep your mouth shut or be, don't have to be positive all the time when you're alone, but when you're with a young person, be thoughtful about what you say about yourself and about them, and then about others too. Like my dad talking about my sister, he wasn't talking to me, he was talking to her, but I just came right in, and he had fat phobia. He was very critical of fat people. And so I grew up with that message. And but we broke. One sister's dead, the other one struggled with her body for a long time, and here I am and trying to keep it going.
Watch One Girl Revolution's Emmy-nominated short documentary, The Girl Inside, on our YouTube channel or at onegirlrevolution.com. The Girl Inside features a poignant look at the stories of incarcerated women within Cook County Jail and a life-changing academic course taught by Dr. Laura Biaggi called Storytelling as a Healing Art. This short documentary reunites Dr. Biaggi with 5 of her former students for a special one-day course on the transformative power of our stories and our voices. And what is revealed is the girl inside. Watch the Emmy-nominated short documentary, The Girl Inside, today on YouTube or at onegirlrevolution.com.
I love those videos of little kids where they have like their little like mantra that obviously their parents are teaching them, where it's like, I am beautiful, I am loved, I am this, I am that. And I actually have an adult friend who, she was like, on days that I feel like I'm judging myself, I'm judging my body, whatever, she writes down a script on like a little index card or a variety of scripts that are all positive, and she'll like repeat that to herself over and over and over again, or stand in front of a mirror and do that. And so whenever I see these little kid videos, I always think about that. And we have the power to really drive the way that we think about ourselves and the way that other people think about them. But I just think that that's such a powerful thing, especially on those days where you're having a hard time, or maybe you're more insecure about something, but to really like write down, okay, what are positive affirmations that I can repeat to myself?
That's such a beautiful thing to do, because I mean, I think the thing too to remember on those days is that it's just that culture got in, or the negative messaging got into us, and we turn it on ourselves. And I always like to look at, when I start going after myself, I like to look at what's going on in my life that I'm struggling with, and why have I then turned it on myself instead of going straight towards the thing that I need to deal with, because that's something that can happen. I remember one day it was a day, the Body Positive, we were having funding issues and we got rejected for yet another grant. And I sat with a thank you note from a group of teenagers at a high school, just gushing about what they had gotten from me. And then I'm sitting with this rejection letter, and I was like, which one's my reflection? Because I like to think of, I don't just think of my reflection as what's in the mirror. I think of it as everything. Like anybody I'm with, like, you're my reflection right now. This letter was my reflection. This one wasn't. That one I was going to be like, nope, that has nothing to do with what I do. And I know what I am. And we go down, but we pick ourselves up and we keep going. I do want to say one thing that I just want to make one thing clear, is that our work isn't only about eating disorders, because of the holistic model that we have. And we're really working with identity and people having just an authentic life. And so some people will have eating disorders, some people will struggle with food, but or disordered eating. But then there's so many facets to being that whole person, like you talked about in the beginning, that holistic approach. So I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Yeah, that's a really important thing to bring up, because I know even on your website you talk about, and I know there are even more facets than this, but eating disorders, depression, anxiety, cutting, suicide, substance abuse, relationship violence, right? There are so many different, there are so many more than that, but really looking at this holistic approach at the individual, the bio-individuality is so important for us to think about. And you're just doing transformative work for individuals, but also you're just changing the world. And I can't wait to see where you go from here. So Connie, where does the Body Positive go from here? In your dream of dream worlds, where does the Body Positive go from here?
Oh, in my dream of dream world, our curriculum, our classroom curriculum is in every school in the world, at least, as many schools as we can get it in. And the kindergarten through 8th grade fully is done. And teachers are teaching this work. This is just part of social emotional learning curriculum, or a wellness or health curriculum, or PE curriculum, because it touches on so many facets, like hearing about the competencies. It's, it's health, it's self-care, it's self-love, it's, then image, and then community. So I would love to see it everywhere. I know that it will transform the world if we can get it out there. That's one thing. And then the other piece is for the older ones, the high school and college programs, just that there are communities where people can come together and, continuing that work and going forward with that. But this classroom piece feels really, really important to me, and for the young ones, and real prevention work. So that's, having all these little embodied children, imagine that, who can speak up and use their voice, because they're like, hey, that's not, that's discrimination, and that's that, and you're being mean to so-and-so because of the way they live, I just think that it's going to change the way kids relate to each other. So that's my vision. This fall, this month, actually, we're starting our research study on the 6th through 8th grade curriculum. The teachers are going to start taking our training, and then they'll be teaching this fall, and then we'll be releasing that curriculum sometime this fall. And then we have to raise money to finish the kindergarten through 5th grade.
It's just incredible what you're doing, and I can't wait to see where you go from here. I can't wait to continue to follow and One Girl Revolution, we want to support everything that you're doing and can continue to promote it. For people that are listening, what can they do to support your work? First question. Second question is, what can they do to get involved? So maybe somebody who's listening is a counselor, a teacher, a parent. What can we all do to support the work that you're doing, and what can we do to get involved?
So one of the ways that covers both of those questions is to take our training. And so that supports us. It's not very much. It's like a small amount for what we offer and give. But that way, then somebody can learn about our work, and then they can take it out to other people. So whether you're working in a school, whether you're a parent, whether you're, like I said, yoga teachers or therapists, dietitians, there's just so many tools there. And then that's a beautiful way to get involved, is to teach our work. And then another thing is just, we need people to know we exist. So spreading the word and letting people know we exist. Obviously, donations make a huge difference. We are at a point where we really need to raise money to finish this curriculum. And it did take longer than we thought, because it's so good. And that's the word that people are like, how do it take so long? It's because it's so good, and we took our time with it and really are thoughtful about everything that we did, and worked with groups of teachers and educators. And so, yeah, donations make a huge difference right now. If people know about people who have foundations or things like that, that really helps as well.
I will be sure to put your website, all your social media links. I always say that the free and easy way to promote any organization or anyone who's on this podcast is just to follow and share. So share about the work, share about the organization, so that helps so much. Sometimes that's more helpful than anything, because you never know who's going to see it. But like you said, anything that people can do to donate, to get connected with you. And I'm sure they can reach out to you too, if they have ideas.
Oh, absolutely.
Or things that they want.
info@bodypositive.org is
wonderful. And I will put, I'll put the website and all the ways that people can get in touch with you. But it's just incredible what you've done, what the Body Positive has done. And I can't wait to see where you go from here. Connie, I know you shared a little bit about your own story, but I want to know from you, if you could get to the very root of why you do what you do, especially on those difficult days where you're just like, why am I doing this? Does anybody even care? I have those moments from time to time. So I'm saying that in relation, but if you could get to the very root, the driving force of why you do what you do every single day, what would you say that root is?
I have chills from head to toe just thinking about it. The thing that keeps me going are when I hear from one of the young ones saying, this completely transformed my life. I get to go to college is one of the things I hear a lot, without the burden of hating my body and dealing with food issues. And then watching what they do, watching what my daughter's done with her life, watching what I can't count how many now that, have stayed in touch with me and what they're doing. And I believe that this is my way of contributing to changing the world. I can't do everything, but these young ones can go out, and old ones, whatever age, and go out and take on the other issues in the world that need to be addressed. Hunger, racism, climate, all the things. There's so much that needs to be done. And when somebody is embodied and doesn't have the distraction, then they can do anything. And that's my hope. And that's that's all I can do.
Well, you're doing it. You're doing it. And I love so much. It's like, no matter what age we are, no matter where we are in life, I believe that life is full of many chapters, right? Sometimes you don't have money to give. Sometimes you don't have time. Sometimes, it's like time, money, talent, like what can you be giving? And sometimes you have chapters of your life where you just feel like you have nothing more to give because you're giving to your family or your kids or whatever. But there's so much to be done, like you shared, on so many different topics. And so I always encourage people to find your organization or find something that you care passionately about and either give of your time, your treasure, or your talent. Figure out ways to get involved. And you're doing that through the Body Positive. And I can't wait to see where you go from here. I encourage everybody to check you out and get involved in the work that you're doing in whatever capacity they can. But
Right. I mean, because we can, people can help us with marketing ideas or, PR or whatever, all sorts of things. There's so many things to help with.
yeah.
So that's another way to get involved with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or if they know, like if they work in media or they know someone in media, to look for opportunities for you to share about your work, because that can also have a ripple effect. But Connie, I want to ask you, because you are a one girl revolution. That's why we wanted to have you on the podcast to share about your story. I know there are so many one girl revolutions in the body positive as well who are doing amazing work. But who is a one girl revolution to you? Who's a woman or girl that inspires you?
My mom. My mom is an amazing human. My mom went back to school when we graduated. My mom is brilliant. Her brain wasn't fed when we were all kind of in our teenage years. She was not fulfilled, and she then went back to school the year I graduated from high school. And even like I had to stay home because she needed to go back to school. They didn't have enough money to send me away. And she just blossomed. And then she went back to school again when she was in her late 50s and became a therapist and worked with Vietnam veterans. So right, the age I am now, she was starting her next career. I mean, it was, and healed so many wounded veterans. I mean, and they still call her. It's amazing. She's 95 and they still call her. Some do, the ones that are alive, that they just love her, and she changed their lives. And she was about service. We talk about it a lot. Because she's always telling me, like, you're doing so much for everybody. And I was like, Mom, you did the same thing. I learned from you. I learned from the best. We were here to do service, and that's what we do. And then sometimes she'll say that because I'm caring for her, and her brain is changing and she's slowing down. And so she's, I can tell she's like, you do so much for me. And like, and you did the same, and you did the same. And so she's definitely my role model.
Oh, so beautiful.
And she helped me so much. There were days, Mom, I can't do this. She's like, you can do it. It's okay. This is, hard day. You have to trust, things will open up for you. I know this is a hard time. Just keep going. Just keep going. Just keep going.
It's so important to have that support system, whether it's a mom or a friend or a sister, but somebody that you can call in those days, because it does get hard sometimes. And failure is real, right? I think that failure can be a good thing, but it can also just be really disheartening and like, okay, why am I doing this? Nobody's paying attention, or it's not going the way that I thought, or not growing the way that I want. But just to have that support system, and your mom is just such a beacon of light. And I know that she just continues to truck along, but also it's really beautiful that her legacy lives on. Even now she's still alive, but her legacy lives on through you, and you're building your own legacy. And I know that'll be the same with you and your daughter. So Connie, I always end this podcast on one question. So I'd like to ask you, if you could leave women and girls around the world with one message, what would it be?
I'm going to first give a quote from a young person that I worked with who's probably now close to 40. Way back, I met her when she was 11. And early on in her teen years, we had a video camera on her, and she said, it's all how you feel about your own body, because this is home. And if you're not comfortable at home, you're not going to be comfortable anywhere else. That was Kaylin. And so for me, the one thing is remembering that this body that we have is something to be cherished, even if we struggle with parts of it. I know with chronic illnesses, there's so many things that make it hard sometimes to be embodied. The word embody is to provide a spirit with a physical form. And so this body allows us to have life. And so do whatever you can to get help if you're struggling, knowing that you deserve to get that help, and knowing that it's worth it to be free. It's so wonderful to be free in our bodies most of the time.
Right.
Most of the days, most of the moments. But it's so worth it, because it just makes everything so much easier, and that there's beauty and passion and life force and talent in each one of us. And I just encourage each person to dig deep and find that and bring it out.
And you're not alone, right? So many of us, we struggle with the same things. And I know with the work you're doing, you're building community, but sometimes life can feel isolating, especially with social media or, not being invited to things. Even in our own friend group, sometimes you're like, well, why not me? Why didn't I get invited? Or am I not pretty enough? You start to like second guess everything. But it's so important for us to build our tribe and not be afraid to say you need help or you need to talk to somebody. And I love that some of those discussions are starting to become more prevalent in culture, where it's like people are more likely to share about things that they're experiencing or struggling with and really getting that help. But life is full of many chapters, and there are going to be struggles and days that we have to go through those struggles. But like you said, there's so much beauty in this life and so much beauty in this world.
And for me to be able to be vulnerable and to share myself as I am, I think that that's one of the gifts that I give, because other people can see that it's okay to be vulnerable when it's safe. I don't want to say that for everybody, but just to, honor that, it's okay to know that you're struggling and talk about it.
Connie, you were such a beacon of light. I can't wait to continue to stay in touch with you and the Body Positive and see where you go from here. Thank you so much for joining the One Girl Revolution podcast. And thank you for all the incredible work that you do.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Kate. Thanks for what you're doing. I'm so excited about what you're doing too.
Thank you so much.
Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. That's the number One Girl REVO. And you can find more information on One Girl Revolution at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com.